The morning I walked out of the Riverside County Courthouse with my signed divorce decree, I didn't cry. I'd already used up every tear I had over the previous 18 months. What I felt instead was something quieter and sharper, the particular clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself. I sat in my car in the parking garage for exactly 4 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard. Then I picked up my phone and called my father. "Dad, it's done." He exhaled slowly. "How are you feeling?" "I need you to do something for me, today, if possible." There was a pause. My father, Warren Caldwell, had built Caldwell Property Group from a single commercial listing in Phoenix into a mid-sized real estate development firm with offices in 3 states. He was not a man who made impulsive decisions. But he was also a man who had watched his only daughter slowly disappear inside a marriage he'd had reservations about from the beginning. "Tell me," he said, "I need you to terminate Marcus's brother and his cousin, and whoever else his mother convinced you to hire over the past 4 years." Another pause, longer this time. "Diana." His voice was careful. "I know, Dad. I know what I'm asking. But they were never there because they were qualified. You know that. I know that. And now that Marcus and I are finished, there's no reason for them to stay." He didn't answer right away. In the background, I could hear the ambient noise of his office, the hum of the HVAC, his assistant's muffled voice somewhere down the hall. "Give me until end of business today," he finally said. I drove home with the windows down, even though it was 92 degrees outside. I needed the heat. I needed to feel something physical and uncomplicated while my brain worked through everything else. My name is Diana Caldwell. I'm 37 years old, and for the past 6 years, I handed my life over to a man who was perfectly happy to take it. I met Marcus Webb at a charity fundraiser for a pediatric hospital here in Scottsdale. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, effortlessly, almost unconsciously, as though they'd been born already knowing how to make a room tilt slightly in their direction. He laughed at the right moments. He listened when I talked. He asked follow-up questions. I was 31. I was running the marketing division of my father's company, doing work I was genuinely proud of, living in a condo I'd bought myself. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me. I thought that meant I was being smart. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. My father took me to lunch the following week. "Tell me about his work history," he said, cutting his steak with the precise, unhurried motions of a man who had been eating in restaurants like this his entire adult life. I told him what I knew. Marcus had done some project management for a construction company in Denver. Before that, some kind of logistics role. He was between positions when we met, but he was sharp, he was motivated, and he had ideas. My father set down his fork. "And his family? His mom is lovely. His brother Kevin manages a restaurant in Tempe. His cousin Bryce does something in finance." Dad looked at me in the way he sometimes did, not unkindly, but with a patience that contained within it a very large amount of unsaid things. "You love him," he said. "I do. Then I'll trust your judgment." He picked his fork back up. "I just want you to keep your eyes open," I told him. I would. I believed it when I said it. Marcus and I got married on a Saturday in October. It was a beautiful wedding. Outdoor ceremony, string lights, the kind of photos that look like they were staged but actually weren't. His mother, Renee, sat in the front row and cried. She had her arm around Kevin the whole time. 3 months later, Marcus mentioned that Kevin was having trouble at the restaurant. The owners were selling, the new management was making changes, and Kevin was likely going to be out of a job. "He's really good with people," Marcus said. "And he knows how to manage a team." I was thinking, do you think your dad would have anything for him? I should have felt the shape of that moment. I should have recognized it for what it was. "I can ask," I said. My father hired Kevin as an operations coordinator. Kevin was pleasant enough in person, showed up on time, didn't make waves. 3 months after that, Renee called me herself. "Bryce has been laid off," she said. "I hate to even bring it up, sweetheart, but I know how much Warren respects good financial minds, and Bryce really is so talented with numbers." Bryce joined the accounting department 6 weeks later. It was gradual enough that I didn't see it clearly until I was already inside it. By the time Marcus and I had been married for 2 years, Kevin had been promoted to regional operations manager, Bryce had been given oversight of 2 subsidiary accounts, and Renee had begun stopping by the office twice a week to have lunch with Marcus, who by then my father had brought on as a senior project liaison. My father had done it for me. I understand that now. He'd wanted me to be happy, and he'd made accommodations for that, and I had let him, and none of it had been fair to him. The first time I suspected something was wrong with the Thornfield account, I was reviewing a quarterly report that crossed my desk almost by accident. A routing discrepancy. Small enough to be a rounding error. Except it wasn't in a place where rounding errors typically lived. I brought it to my father's CFO, a meticulous woman named Gwendolyn, who had been with the company for 11 years. I noticed it too, she said, and the look on her face me she'd been sitting on it. How long? I asked. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. I sat down across from her desks. How long, Gwendolyn? She folded her hands on the desk. 14 months. I didn't confront Marcus. Not right away. I knew, from some instinct I couldn't fully articulate, that if I tipped him off before we had everything documented, it would disappear. Money could be moved. Records could be edited. Bryce worked in accounting. Instead, I called a forensic accountant named Philip Rourke, who came recommended by my father's attorney. Philip was in his 50s, quiet, thorough, and possessed of the particular humorlessness that I find extremely comforting in people who are examining financial crimes on my behalf. He spent 6 weeks reviewing records. I told Marcus I was working on a new marketing campaign that required a lot of late nights. He didn't ask many follow-up questions, which I noted. By the time Philip presented his findings to me and my father and our attorney, we had a picture that was both clearer and worse than I'd expected. The scheme wasn't complex. It was actually quite simple, which was maybe why it had worked as long as it had. Bryce had been approving invoices from a vendor that didn't fully exist. Small amounts, spread across multiple accounts, routed through 2 shell entities that had been set up 18 months into his employment. The total over 14 months came to approximately $380,000. Kevin's role was less direct but not invisible. Certain operational approvals that should have gone through my father's sign-off had been quietly rerouted through Kevin's desk. Not all of them, just the ones that made the invoice trail harder to follow. Marcus had known. I don't have documented proof that his hands touched the money inside, but I have 6 years of marriage to a man who was never surprised by anything he should have been surprised by, and I have a very clear memory of a night about 2 years earlier when I found him on his phone at midnight. And he told me it was a work call from a client overseas, and I believed him because I was tired and I trusted him. And I was a fool. I filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning. My attorney had already drafted the paperwork. I didn't tell Marcus I was doing it until the process server showed up at the office, where he was using my family's resources to do whatever it was he actually spent his days doing. He called me 11 times that afternoon. I answered on the 11th. Diana. His voice had that particular quality it got when he was recalibrating, smooth, almost confused sounding, as though he genuinely couldn't understand how reality had shifted without his permission. Talk to me. Whatever you think is happening, we can work through this. I don't think anything is happening, I said. I know what happened. My attorney will be in touch with yours. Your father put you up to this. My father doesn't put me up to anything. That's not how either of us works. I paused. Please stop calling me. I hung up. The divorce took 8 months. Marcus contested the asset division, which his attorney seemed less enthusiastic about as the proceedings continued, and the financial documentation we'd assembled became increasingly difficult to argue with. My attorney was formidable and thorough and cost an amount of money I am very grateful I had access to. During those 8 months, Renee called me 4 times. The first call was sympathetic. She was heartbroken. She just wanted to understand. She hoped we could talk like 2 adults. The second call was less sympathetic. By the third call, she was telling me that I'd never appreciated her son, and that my father's company was only where it was because of the work Marcus and Kevin and Bryce had contributed. I let that call go to voicemail and played it for my attorney, who found it professionally interesting. The fourth call came the night before my divorce was finalized. I didn't answer. I was in bed with a glass of wine, watching something on Netflix that I couldn't have told you the plot of, and I looked at my phone screen and then saw Renee's name and felt so tired that I could have slept for a year. I set the phone face down on my nightstand. The next morning, I walked into that courthouse, and I signed my name, and I was done. My father moved quickly. He was a precise man, and he had been patient for a very long time, and now there was no longer a reason for patience. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, Kevin had been formally terminated with cause. The documentation Philip Rourke had compiled made the termination legally defensible on multiple grounds. Kevin's HR meeting lasted approximately 20 minutes. I know because my father texted me afterward. Done. He didn't say much. Security walked him out. Bryce's termination was more complicated because it had to be coordinated with the company's legal team and the referral we'd made to the Arizona Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit. He was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, his building access was revoked, and his company laptop was immediately surrendered to our IT security team. Marcus received formal notice that his project liaison contract, which had been renewed twice during our marriage, would not be renewed again. The contract had always been technically with an LLC he'd set up, rather than directly with him, so the termination was clean. I was in my office when my father called to tell me it was all done. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Strange," I said. It was true. I'd been building toward this for so long that its arrival felt slightly unreal. "Are you okay? You hired them. Some of this is going to be uncomfortable for you." "Diana." His voice was matter-of-fact. "I hired them because you married Marcus and I love you. I should have paid closer attention. That's on me. But none of them were good for this company, and I knew that earlier than I acted on it. I'm not interested in pretending otherwise." I held the phone for a moment without saying anything. "Thank you, Dad. Get some sleep tonight," he said. "Come in tomorrow." I didn't expect what happened next. I probably should have, knowing what I knew about Renee Webb, but I think some part of me believed that the terminations would be self-explanatory enough to close the chapter without further confrontation. I was wrong about that. I was at my father's house on a Sunday afternoon, 3 days after Kevin and Bryce had been let go. My father has a property in Paradise Valley. A ranch-style home on a large lot. The kind of place that exists in a particular register of Arizona real estate that announces a certain level of permanent success without being showy about it. I was helping him sort through some documentation our attorney had requested when we heard noise from the front of the house. Not a knock. Noise. My father's property manager, a steady-tempered man named Gerald, appeared in the doorway of the study. "Mr. Caldwell," he said. "There are people at the front gate." We both went to the window. Through the iron gate at the end of the driveway, I could see Renee. She was with Kevin. There were 2 other people I didn't recognize, and they had printed signs. White poster boards with marker text. And Renee was speaking loudly enough that even through the glass and the distance I could make out the general shape of her words without hearing them clearly. "How long have they been there?" my father asked Gerald. "About 10 minutes. I was waiting to see if it resolved itself." It did not look like it was resolving itself. My father straightened his collar, which was a gesture I recognized as him composing himself, rather than his collar requiring any adjustment. "Call Gerald," he said to me, then caught himself. "Call our attorney, and let's go find out what she wants us." We walked down the front path together. My father pressed the intercom at the gate. "Rennie," he said. "I can hear you fine. There's no need to shout." Rennie's face was flushed. She was a put-together woman normally. Always dressed carefully, hair always done, and the disorder she was in now was its own kind of information. "You had no right," she said, her voice cracking at the edges. "Kevin has a family. He has a mortgage. You can't just throw people away." "Kevin was terminated for cause," my father said. His voice was even. "I'd encourage you to speak with an employment attorney about what that means before you decide on your next steps. He didn't do anything." She grabbed the gate with both hands. "Whatever Diana told you, she's lying. She's doing this out of spite, because Marcus wouldn't let her walk all over him. I had told myself I would let my father handle this. I'd planned to stand quietly and let his measured authority do what it did, but something about that particular sentence, Marcus wouldn't let her walk all over him, reached through my composure and took hold of something. "Rennie," I said, stepping up beside my father. "Bryce created invoices for a vendor that didn't exist. That money went somewhere. The forensic accountant has 14 months of records. The AG's office has a referral. This isn't me being spiteful. This is accounting." She stared at me. The 2 people I didn't recognize shifted behind her. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, but the confidence in her voice had gone somewhere. "The vendor was called Southwest Regional Consulting Services," I said. "It was registered to an address in Mesa that turns out to be a UPS store. If Bryce's attorney wants to argue with the documentation, he's welcome to try." Kevin, who had been standing slightly behind his mother with his jaw tight and his eyes somewhere slightly to the left of my face, said, "Mom, let's go. I am not going anywhere until—" "Mom," his voice was flat. "There's nothing here, let's go." Rennie looked at him. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at my father with an expression that I think was meant to be contempt but landed closer to exhaustion. "You ruined my family?" she said. My father looked at her with the patience of a man who had run businesses for 30 years and been through his own losses. Your son married my daughter, he said quietly. What happened to your family is the result of choices your son and your nephew made inside my company. I'm sorry for whatever pain that causes you personally. But I want you to leave my property now, Renee. Don't come back. She left. Kevin walked her to a car parked on the street, and the other two people followed without speaking. One of them dropped their sign in my father's driveway as they went. Gerald picked it up after they'd driven away. My father and I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table for a while without saying much. He made coffee even though it was almost 4 in the afternoon. You didn't have to come outside, he said. I know. I had it. I know you did. I wrapped both hands around the mug he'd set in front of me, but she was talking about me. I needed to be the one to say it. He looked at me for a moment with the particular expression he had when he was deciding whether to push further or let something rest. He let it rest. The weeks after that were quiet in the way that things are quiet after a long season of noise. There's an adjustment to the silence. You keep expecting something to happen, and then it doesn't, and slowly, you begin to understand that the not happening is itself the thing. Philip Rourke's report went to the AG's office. Bryce's attorney was in contact with the prosecutors. Kevin retained his own counsel. I was told by our attorney to expect that the process would take many months and to focus on the parts of my life I could actually control. Marcus called me once more, about 3 weeks after the divorce was final. I don't know what he wanted because I didn't answer, and he didn't leave a voicemail. I thought about that for a while, the absence of a message, and then I stopped thinking about it. I moved into a rental house in Arcadia while I figured out what I wanted next. It was smaller than the condo I'd sold when Marcus and I got married, and it had a backyard with an orange tree in it that the landlord told me produced fruit every spring. I'd never had a fruit tree before. I found that I was looking forward to it. I've thought a lot about what I would say to the version of myself who sat in that restaurant across from her father 8 years ago, listening to him ask careful questions about a man she'd decided to love. I wouldn't tell her not to marry Marcus. I don't think that's the lesson. I think the lesson is smaller and more specific. When the people closest to you ask questions, don't rush past the discomfort of not having good answers. Sit with the questions. Let them be inconvenient. My father asked me about Marcus's work history, and I told him what I knew, and what I knew was thin, and I covered that thinness with confidence I hadn't earned. That's not the sentence I planned to repeat. Gwendolyn, my father's CFO, got a significant bonus that year. She'd been sitting on information that was uncomfortable to bring forward, and she'd done it anyway when I gave her an opening. That kind of professional courage is worth compensating. The investigation took 14 months. Bryce ultimately pled guilty to wire fraud and was sentenced to 22 months in federal prison along with restitution. Kevin received a lesser charge for his role in the operational cover and agreed to a plea deal. I'm told Marcus's attorney is still negotiating, which is what happens when you're adjacent to a crime and technically difficult to prosecute but not actually innocent. I went back to work the week after the confrontation at my father's gate. My desk was where I'd left it. My team was where I'd left them. The marketing campaign I'd been developing before everything came apart was still in my computer, waiting. I opened it and got back to work. That's the thing about the life you had before someone took it. It doesn't stop existing just because you stopped paying attention to it. It waits. It's patient in the way that real things are patient. I'm 37 years old. I have a job I'm genuinely good at. I have a father who made space for me even when I didn't deserve it. I have an orange tree in my backyard that I am very much looking forward to. The road ahead belongs